Sio, Deutschu. Okuno Khalid Nagiski, Dawado. Hello, how are you again? This is Chief Eagle Spirit Dancing of the Cherokee Blackfeet Cultural Circle. This is part 2 of Black Indians Denied, White Indians Accepted. Just wanted to pick up from where I left off with regards to the historical pieces that have been missing from textbooks with regards to indigenous peoples and how they are portrayed, the illustrations that we see, pictures, etc. Um, and this is a controversial topic because I talked to some people who are really stumped, they're surprised, they're shocked, disbelief when they find out the original Indians weren't read. I give an in-depth breakdown of how this perception came to be. This is a fabrication over time. In one of my other videos that I did on the Red Indian myth, this all corresponds again. This is just another chapter that I'm dealing with in regards to what's affecting a lot of indigenous peoples today. Those who are of mixed blood, whether they're black or they're white. It seems particularly that those who are of a darker hue are denied when it comes to receiving benefits that are guaranteed in the Constitution. It talks about the indigenous tax exemptions. It's clearly stated in the Constitution. And other benefits when it comes to housing, land, reparations, restitutions. These things are what a lot of indigenous communities today are finding out and becoming aware of, and they're taking advantage of these benefits. And it seems as though that if you're an individual Indian that is coming into oneself of a darker hue, and you find out that your parents, grandparents weren't native, whether one was or both, and you're darker, it somehow, when you will go apply for some benefit through the government agency, whether it's the IRS, whether it's the local, governments, for some type of compensation that's there, you have to look for it and find it, whether it's a grant, whatever the case is. It's much harder if you're darker, and especially with regards to DNA. The darker you are, they want more proof, because they say that the original Indians that were here weren't dark skinned. Yeah, they make these felonious claims to keep us out of the loop, so they can claim that which is rightfully ours, the lands that some of us are applying for, even to this day through litigation, to reacquire some of our lands that in fact there are white people who have today all across this country that they know they are illegally occupying. So and this is what I believe ultimately is the culprit here. They don't want to relinquish what was stolen. So, okay, we understand that, you stole it, fine, you got away with it for a few hundred years now. And you know that you've managed to divide most of us through hues and, attrition and other means, arbitration, whatever. But it does leave the door open for us to fight. At every crossroad, every interval, we have to raise our voices. So the darker Indians are in a self-defense mode, if you will, that we have to defend our positions as Indians. Here I am, a light brown skin Indian. I don't have too much problem in my claims of being indigenous. Well, most people see me and say, "Oh, you look Native." I say, "Well, do you know what all Native Americans look like?" Some will say, "Yeah, they look like you." I say that's ridiculous. That's like saying like all white people look the same. Well, anyway, um, all Native Americans do not look alike. They vary in hue, hair texture, phenotypes. Our DNA is different, but our cultures on the outside, the heritage, the things that we made and how we lived, didn't vary that much. You know, our lifestyles, our honor. There was an Indian saying once: "Before I tell a lie, I would chop my arm off." You know, we had laws, spiritual laws. You came into, the community through birth, through adoption. You didn't break our laws. You were exiled or killed, depending on what it was. So we had spiritual laws that were in place that didn't turn us into savages, immoral beings that's supposed to be human, killing ourselves and destroying everything around us through lies and deception and destruction, pillaging, brutality, etc. These are the vices that the Europeans brought. If you don't agree with me, that's just too bad. History shows that to be a fact. So, but I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about the present and what's going on within the indigenous communities around. In terms of a lot of the reservations, whether they're in North Carolina, South Carolina, Oklahoma, I can touch on a particular subject with the Freedmens and the Cherokees in Oklahoma, that Chad Smith and others wanted to remove the Freedmens, who were some slaves who were on indigenous plantations, white Cherokees. That's what I call them, because that's what they were. They lived like white people. They wanted to be like white people back at that particular time, in the latter part of the 17th century, because of what happened with Indians that were mixing with white people and the children that came out. They, and even some of the darker ones, wanted to follow white people into the fold of slavery. And I hear people say, and I've even heard some of my own indigenous people say, "Oh, we treated the Africans well." You know, what manner of man would enslave another man? First of all, slavery wasn't something of our own creation. If we did have slavery, it was more close to, as my brother put it in the movie Amistad, Yosef Sinke. He said it was more, slavery was more close to worker. You paid off your debts. If you had a debt, you worked in Crazy Horse's house. You know, so you paid off your debt, and then you were free to leave. You weren't stripped of your name, your language, your culture, identity. You kept all of that. So there's no comparison here. I hear these frivolous arguments from people who say that, "Oh, well, slavery is slavery." No, that's a lie. If you owe something, you're indebted to someone, you have to pay it back. Somehow, somewhere, you have to do something to pay off that debt. And such was the case. Such was the case. With our people in different tribes around the country. Yes, we did have a type of slavery, if that's what you want to refer to it as. I would like to say it was a indentured servitude that you paid off a debt that you had. Once paid that debt off, you gone back to your life to do what you had to do. Or you paid whatever bartering system had, or if you had something to give to pay off your debt, you just pay it off. Fine, bang, that was it, end of story. But slavery that the European practice here was nowhere in comparison to how we regarded paying off debts. That slavery was used to make someone else rich at the blood, sweat, and tears of someone else who didn't look like them. And then you had European Indians. It sounds like an oxymoron. A word that doesn't even go together. But this was something a lot of us or excuse me, few of us adopted this sick mentality. When they talk about Kanamneklage, the Ridge faction, the Budanat, Elias Budanat, and the Ross faction from the Trail of Tears. Those families, they had plantation. It was a very less than 1% of the tribe that engaged in these. And if you looked at from the portrayals that they put on the screens, most of them look white. And they wanted, because either their fathers were white or their mothers were white. So they wanted to follow in their father or mother's footsteps of being a plantation owner, a slave trader, which I think was despicable. I'm not saying that they should have left the history out. They put that there and said, yeah, this is what we did. You know, there was no sorrow, or this is something we need to correct. Although, and albeit that the indigenous white plantation owners treated their slaves a whole lot better, almost like family. Granted, fine, they weren't as brutal and as immoral as their white counterpart who lived across the way with plantations where they were beating their slaves half to death. They didn't do that. But to look at that then and to look at what's going on today, how Chad Smith would try to throw off the black Indians. They call them freedmen because they were freed during the Emancipation Proclamation, and the Indigenous Council decided, I think even before the Emancipation Proclamation, decided to let them go because they knew that slavery was immoral. They came to a decision ultimately. And again, I believe this was in fact before the Emancipation Proclamation by Lincoln. I could be wrong, but I believe it was before, that they relinquished their titles and their holds over the Africans. Now, some of these Africans had already married. It wasn't just white people who were marrying Indians and having children. They were black people too, just as much, if not more. This is where I want to really emphasize, because I really want to emphasize on this, because this is something that's not talked about as much. The way the European establishes it is like as though they themselves married, had relationships, had children more with Indians than Africans did. And you'll find, oh wow, you'll find so many stories of slaves, Africans who fled from various parts of the eastern seaboard into the interior of the United States, and even into all up and down the East Coast, where they met and intermingled with indigenous tribes, became chiefs. Some of them, these stories have yet to be told, need to be told. And anyway, if there's a filmmaker out there who is interested, you need to get at me at lordkhalifa@yahoo.com. That's LORDKHALIFA@yahoo.com. I'm not an actor. I've taken a few lessons. I used to work in television, but I believe that is something that we need to really explore. The African Indian experience in North America. It needs to be investigated, explored, and portrayed on the screen. To the dismay of those who might not like it, who cares? Because it's the truth, and it's something that needs to be seen and heard. So on this particular episode here, which I'm getting ready to wrap up, basically just expounds more on the relationship between white Indians who are of mixed blood, who adopted the sick mentality of the Europeans, and black indigenous people who have been denied as a result. And on that note, I say adieu.